Well, sure as we find ourselves on the eve of the beginning of the season of autumn, the football season has begun. Tonight, the Steelers will mark their first game of the season. And like everything else that we've been experiencing during the course of this year, everything is altered by the COVID virus crisis. Some stadiums will allow for small numbers of people, others not have anybody. And I wonder if one of the things that is a consistent happening at every televised football game might in fact also be a casualty of COVID. I think you know what I'm talking about. You know, whenever the cameras span the crowds of people that have come to football games in the past, somebody somewhere along the line is going to be holding up that sign, John 3:16. You know, and we heard what that quote was in today's gospel. God so loved the world that he gave his only son so that everyone who believes in him might not perish but might have eternal life. That sign in the midst of what becomes a cultural reality in our world is a very important one, a necessary reminder. But more important than the signs that we see at football games becomes the sign of the cross. You know, certainly one of the most predominant elements of this seminary chapel, and you've been able to appreciate it over the course of these months since mid-March, is in fact this magnificent crucifix. And I suspect that you have a particular crucifix that might be important to you. Maybe it's the crucifix that was in the church in which you got married. Or maybe it's a crucifix that hangs in your home that was a gift from someone. Or maybe the crucifix that you wear around your neck. I know the crucifix that I wear is one that my mom wore, and after she died, I've been wearing it ever since. Or the crucifix that might be on a favorite rosary. And today is an important day for us to focus on the victory of the cross, the exaltation of the cross, the triumph of the cross, if you will. Because, from the eyes of the secular world, and especially in the days of Jesus, the cross was seen as a sign of failure, was seen as a tree for criminals. And as you and I had a chance to listen to the passage that came from the book of Numbers, we hear another reference to serpents. And you know, within the context of that story, as the Hebrew people were marching on to go to the promised land, they demonstrated, characteristics that is so human in all of us, no matter what age we live in, is to complain. To forget about the ways in which God really is with us, and to complain when things don't seem to match up to our expectations. And no matter what God did in that journey of the Hebrew people to the promised land, the people still complained. And part of what happened was, as a result of their complaining, a number of them were bit by serpents and they died. And finally the people came to Moses and said, "Won't you please intercede for us before God and tell him how sorry we are?" And as a sign of God's accepting their forgiveness, Moses held up the serpent, the bronze seraph serpent, and the people were able to acknowledge God's goodness. What was for them a reality of death became a victory. And the same thing happens when you and I take a look at the cross. No matter how the Roman officials in the days when Jesus was crucified would have seen that as an act of failure, it was not at all. For us, it becomes a sign of triumph. Jesus triumphed over death, and that was in fact culminated by his resurrection from the dead a couple of days after Good Friday. It becomes a sign of victory, and not only in history, but it becomes a sign of victory in each of our own personal lives. I'm reminded of a very beautiful story of a bride who was very nervous on the day of her wedding, and she, the night before, as they were doing their practice, getting ready for the wedding ceremony the next day, she confided to the wedding coordinator that she was very much afraid that as she walked down the aisle of the church, she was going to trip and fall. And the wedding coordinator said, ma'am, do you mind if I can give you a good piece of advice? You see, what's at the end of the aisle is, in fact, the cross of Jesus Christ. I guarantee you, if you keep your eyes fixed on the cross, you will not fall. And certainly the advice the wedding coordinator gave to the bride had more to say than just walking down the aisle on the day of her wedding. It's a wise piece of advice for all of us. Life is tough. We experience many struggles. Maybe some of you are experiencing tough struggles today. As we experience those struggles, it's important to remember those two signs. John 3:16, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that everyone who believes in him might not perish but have eternal life. And it's important, more importantly, that we remember that other sign, the sign of the cross. And if we keep our eyes on the triumph of Jesus on that cross, then we will experience likewise through Jesus the triumph over all that may weigh us down in life, and especially this day.